Shrestha, welcome to the ANN podcast.
Okay, thank you.
I hear that you, as a student, are a student of aeronautical engineering.
Yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, I thought that aeronautical engineering is one of the toughest sort of engineerings that normal people think of. Is it really the case that it's very demanding compared to others?
In my time, before there were no universities that were allocated for this aeronautical engineering. So there was an institute that is to prepare for entrance examination for bachelor's in engineering in Pulsop. So there's an institute called PEA.
PEA.
Yeah. So I went there for preparation classes for engineering, but later found out that they also sort of managed the courses of aeronautical in China. So I spoke to the person, and after I knew that after a month, I guess, after the month of attending the preparation classes, I knew that they would process for the aeronautical engineering courses also. So after that, I went to that institute and I talked about the course, and it was new to me. So I thought about trying it. So okay, and after I applied for the course, and I went to China for aeronautical engineering. So in China, I started my course. It was tough. It was really tough. It was really tough for me at the beginning.
You must have been the only Nepalese in your classroom to pursue aeronautical engineering, or were there other Nepalese as well?
We were about 15 to 16 Nepalese students. We were about 52 students there, Nepalese students.
So there was a lot of Nepalese companionship.
Yeah, there was.
And after the completion of the course, you had to come to our country.
It was not necessary. So after my thesis classes, I was given an opportunity about joining the masters in the Chinese in same college. So my associate professor, he gave me an opportunity about studying masters and going for research in turbine engine sections. So there was a course about the wind turbine conservation or something like that. I forgot the name of the course, but it was about wind turbine. So he gave me that opportunity, but I rejected that. So I came back to Nepal. I thought that I would do something back in Nepal. But then I didn't knew about the courses, about the regulation in Nepal, about the NCR, Nepalese Civil Aviation regulations, requirements. I didn't know about that. I didn't know about the licensing processes. I didn't know about the examination processes. I knew nothing. So I was blank, but I thought that I would do something back in Nepal. So I came to Nepal. I rejected the course.
Okay. There was an aeronautical engineer we talked to about a month or so ago.
Yeah.
He told us that aeronautical engineers can either be involved in manufacturing, research, or designing of the aircraft.
Yeah.
And since none of these are existent in our country, right, we don't
have any designing, and we don't have any manufacturing, we don't have any production in Nepal.
So it must have been very difficult for an aeronautical engineer like you to finally discover that our country, since you came back home with a lot of aspirations.
Yeah. I knew that there was no designing organizations, but I didn't know there was no any manufacturing, no any production organizations in Nepal. When I came to Nepal, when I searched for jobs and opportunities and all that, then only I came to know that there was no such things as production, as manufacturing. So only thing I knew was about the maintenance. So there were maintenance organizations, so operators and maintenance organizations and all that things. So I had to join there. So I searched for the jobs. It was really difficult for me to search for the jobs because back at that time there were no such any information about aviations in Nepalese society, you know. So there were no any informations about aviation, no any informations about licensing, no any informations about job opportunities and all that. So we used to look at the newspaper, search for the jobs. So there were no vacancies. So we could not find the job. It was really frustrating that time, really very frustrating, and I could not find a job in aviation for as long as I guess 8 months or so. Yeah. So I worked as a supervisor in BBSM, that Parpatini. As a supervisor, I worked there for about a month and a half.
Okay. And how did finally a breakthrough come about in, say, after 8 months of being not involved in the aviation sector?
Yeah. Then the owner of the Parpatini, BBSM, Mr. Minbahadur Groom, he took my CV and gave it to his companion fellow, who was the father of one of my colleagues in NUAA. Back then he was working in FishTail there. So he gave my CV to him, and then after I found a way to enter the aviation.
Okay, so you now primarily work as a maintenance engineer?
Yeah, I work as a maintenance engineer and also as a continuing airworthiness manager. Yeah.
So how difficult was it transitioning from becoming an aeronautical engineer into a maintenance engineer?
It was a bit difficult one. Back then, I have studied about only designing, manufacturing, designing, and such processes, but never about the maintenance. So it's a different course. The designing and the maintaining, these are two different things. So in designing, we are completely dependent on the softwares and theoretical knowledge and all that. But in maintenance, you are working live on the aircraft with spanners and all that. So it was completely two different things. So as an aeronautical engineer, you learn about designing. As a maintenance engineer, you do practical and learning about maintenance, like changing the components, maintaining the components, and all that stuffs. So these are two different things. Designing is different and maintenance is different. So it was again completely new thing to me.
So did you have to do a course about maintenance as well?
Yeah, I had to do the course. There were no any aviation maintenance courses. So all that was available was the examination conducted by Civil Aviation of Nepal. They used to conduct this examination every 90 days, 3 months interval. So I had to work and I had to read and I had to give the exams. So it was really complicated. Time management was really difficult for me. I gave examinations about 6 to 7 papers. We had to give overall total 15 papers, but I had cleared only 6 to 7 papers in 3 years. So that was really frustrating also. I couldn't clear the paper. It was really difficult for me to manage the time. It was really frustrating. That was really the first frustrating part, I guess, so, in my life. So I couldn't manage time. I had to make money to give examinations. We had to pay 15,000 Nepali rupees for each paper. So my salary was, I guess, 15,000 that time per month. So it was really difficult for me. Yeah.
So have now the salaries of people who get into an aircraft as an aircraft maintenance engineer become better over time? Are they more or less stagnant?
If you consider aviation as an whole world as an aviation, so it's like you're getting paid less comparatively.
Compared to other
comparatively other country, because the payment you get is according to the safety level. What is your position in the aviation safety? What is your role in the aviation safety? How well you perform and how well you do. So in case of our culture, it's not so. They pay less to us. Yes.
And might that have something to do with a lot of accidents that we get in our country?
To be frank, as an engineer, that might not be the reason. We cannot
correlate the two.
Yeah, we cannot correlate them. So paying less doesn't mean that we work less. We work as much as we can. So there are certain factors that affects our performances, right? Might be the payment, salary payment, the financial things might be one of them. But I don't think it's related with these accident things.
So I'm wondering about what happened to the rest of the 15 guys who were with you back in China studying the same course. Did they pursue the same field of studies as you did later on?
I'm the first one to get the license from China itself. Oh, so I took my license. Then my friends are there. Two of them are in Samro, and one of the guys is in Yeti Airlines, and other rest of them are abroad. So only, I guess, 4 or 5 of us are there.
Okay. So are you regularly in touch with the ones that are abroad as well?
No, not all of them. Sorry, not all of them. Some of them. Some.
Do you guys have conversations about how it is like to be an engineer in this part of the world compared to where they are?
No. We don't talk about these things because their field is different, as I said before. Because they are involved in designing. We're involved in maintenance. So these are two different things. So they don't know about maintenance. To say the fact that I've almost forgotten about the designing that I've learned before in China. I merely remember designing.
Well, if you've not studied any subject for 7 to 8 years, it tends to take a toll on your memories.
I only remember the designing portion in the AutoCAD, CATIA, all that stuff. But the calculation parts, I merely remember.
Well, how likely is it for an aircraft maintenance engineer to get injured while at work? Because we see that we've got very sharp objects inside an aircraft. We've got blades. You've got to work along with them as well.
We have to be very careful while working with the tools. We have to follow the safety protocols. We have to follow every safety protocols that are allocated for particular tasks to be done. So every manual you check when you're doing the work, every manual you turn says the same thing: safety first. So you have to respect that thing. So if you respect safety, you're not going to get harmed.
Okay. And how much do the people who are working in the aviation sector follow the manual? Because sometimes we hear reports that in other countries, for example, you've got to print the manual every time you go to work in an aircraft.
Yeah.
There are some people who say that this might not necessarily be the case in our country.
And so right now, we have to follow the manuals. That's the procedure. We have to follow manuals. We have to do the tasks that are allocated in the manuals. We can't do the things that are not allocated other than the manuals. So we have to do exactly what the manual says. So as time goes by, we are used to it. We are used to it. We know that what we are going after this, after that. We know every point that we do, right? So it's a practice. But it's a bad practice that don't look the manual, right? So as time goes by, as the time goes by, you are used to the work. Yeah? You do the same thing again and again and again, then you're used to it. Like it's a habit. Right? The brain already knows that you are going to do this, you are going to do this, you are going to do this. So you know the sequence. So what happens, you get a little bit more, complacent. So you develop a type of complacency. Then I know this work. I don't need the manual. I can do this, which we should avoid, right? So that thing, when time goes by, that thing goes on developing. Your complacency goes on developing. That's the reason why most of the guys, senior people, they don't look the manual, so to say. Yeah. One of the reasons might be complacency.
Yeah. One of the reasons might be boredom, because you're looking at the same manual again and again and again.
No, I don't think so, because I don't get bored working. the field of maintenance, right? That's my version. I don't know about the others, but might be complacency is one of the reason.
But when we had the ATR crash about a few months ago, there were a lot of people who said that it's because our engines are very old, it's because our aircraft aren't as well maintained. I think that there's not a lot of truth to that, to those statements.
I completely disagree with that one. You know, that's where the maintenance come in action, right? So we monitor the engine, we monitor the airframe part, we monitor the hours, we monitor the cycles, whatever the component goes on with, we monitor that things, right? So we have certain limitations, right? We have certain limitations. Designers have provided us the manual that you have certain hours for engine to be working. Like you have after 5,000 hours or 10,000 hours, you have to overhaul the engine. You cannot use the engine. You have to send it to the MRO, or you have to send it to the place where the engine overhaul is done. They check the engine, they replace the parts, they do whatever tests are necessary. They check that thing, right? So they send us back, and we are going to install the engine. So everything is checked. Everything is checked, right? We don't have facility in Nepal for such overall procedures. We send it abroad, right? So they check everything. They do the bench test. They see whether the turbines are in correct position or not, whether the turbine operation is correct or not, whether the turbine has elongated or creeped, right? They check everything. So they check everything, every component that are installed on the aircraft, right? Such components which has life. Like after 5 years you cannot use it. We discard that component, right? After 5 years you have to, or 5 years or 5,000 hours, you have to overhaul the engines. You have to send it for the maintenance. So we do that. So every components are checked thoroughly. Every components which have life are checked. Every component which have service life limited are checked. Every component which are on conditions are monitored. So there is no such things as aging, you know, like engine. If you change the what in your perspective, what makes you think that the aircraft is aging?
Well, for me, I've had a bit of knowledge about this because they say that it's a difference between an old aircraft and an airworthy aircraft.
Yeah.
So, very old aircraft, which was, say, manufactured during the time of the World War, might still be airworthy, given that we've got appropriate measures to make sure that the engine is functioning properly, make sure that there's no corrosion, make sure that all of the parts are gelling together.
Maintenance is done, right? So what makes a car old?
I think these are the sort of same things that
we are touching about. Yeah. What makes the car old? We say the car is second hand, right? When we buy the car second hand, the price reduces. When it goes to third hand, it reduces more. What sort of things deducts its price?
Well, it is about the overall quality, efficiency.
Yeah. So it's all about the aging of the car, its engine and its part, right? Whatever ages, right? Whatever ages in the aircraft, we change that thing. We replace it. Or else we do the maintenance on it. If we need to change the knot, we change the knot. We never change the knot of a car, do we? Unless it's lost or something, right? Yeah. So we change the knot, we change the bolts, we change the component itself. We monitor every component, we monitor every action of the aircraft, right? So we are sort of controlling the aging of the aircraft. So these things are different with pressurized and non-pressurized aircraft. If you have pressurized aircraft, there's limitations in the structure ages. But if we talk about the non-pressurized aircraft, right? Some aircraft which are non-pressurized, their structure doesn't age. There is no limitation for their structure, right? So they can go as long as they are airworthy, right? So everything that is correlated with the aging, we check that things, right? So as being a continuing airworthiness manager, my job is to keep the aircraft airworthy, right? So especially I have 4 special functions, right? I have to keep the aircraft airworthy. I have to keep the optional and emergency equipment that I use in the aircraft airworthy, right? I have to check the airworthiness certificate that the aircraft is airworthy, right? So also I have to check the maintenance that are performed on the aircraft are done according to the approved manuals. So we do everything step by step. So we check everything. We check the life. We monitor the life. We change the components. We change the aeronautical appliances that are used in the aircraft. So I completely disagree with that aging things about the aircraft. Yeah.
Okay. I also read somewhere that you've got A, B, C, and D's in terms of aircraft maintenance engineering, and that
Yeah.
there are a certain number of hours you've got to have A type of maintenance, B type, C type, and D, all of that. So as you said, all of those things are checked and certified by people like you before we make sure that an aircraft flies.
Flies, yeah. Before the aircraft flies, right? There are 3 things in our daily aircraft operation. We have 3 things we have to do as an engineer in helicopter, right? We have 3 things. Before the aircraft leaves the ground, we have to check everything. We have the checklist that we have to follow. What else we have to check for aircraft to what are the things we have to check before the aircraft flies? So we check that things, we declare if everything is okay, we declare that the aircraft is airworthy and we sign it on the technical logbook of the aircraft. So when it flies, so it goes somewhere, it lands somewhere, then the responsibility of checking the aircraft's airworthiness is of pilot. So there is a transit check again. So the pilot checks the aircraft. There is a transit checklist on the aircraft. So he checks the checklist and do the tasks is allocated to do on that aircraft, and he checks everything, and if everything is okay, he again certifies that the aircraft is airworthy, and he just signs the technical logbook. So again, when it comes back and the flight is over, again the engineer checks the aircraft. After the last flight, the engineer again checks the aircraft. We have the checklist. What tasks we have to do? What are the tasks that we have to check after the last flight of the day, right? So we check that, and we check everything that are allocated on that checklist, and we again certify that the aircraft is airworthy. So in every steps of the aircraft operation, we are checking the airworthiness of the aircraft. About the A, B, C's, and D's, there are meaning for that one. Do I have to say that too? About the A, B, C, D's?
Yes. In what ways is maintenance of a helicopter very different compared to that of an aeroplane? You said that these systems are different for pressurized and non-pressurized systems.
Yeah, the checklist that we have to check are different, but the procedures are same. The tasks may be different, but procedures are similar to helicopter, to aircraft, even to gliders and all that thing.
Well, I hear that flying helicopters in our country is a bit difficult because they still fly under VFR.
Yeah, it's the terrain that's difficult, that makes it difficult for operation, because we have different types of terrain. So our terrains are really difficult for flying. The weather is unpredictable. The terrains, the highs and lows are very unpredictable. So it's really difficult for a helicopter to operate in this type of terrain. There are many more factors. It's many more factors like weather, like terrain, like airports, Where does the helicopter goes? Most of the places where the plane cannot go, right? The airplane can't go. If you go to the Pokhara, unless it's in rescue, if you go to Pokhara, will you ride a helicopter? Not really, because the plane can easily go on the airport, right? So places where there are no airports, right? Like in most of the places that do not have airports are high altitude places. Like, if you go to the base camp, there are no airports. If you go to certain high altitude places like Pathibara, Kosaikunda, there are no airports. So the mode of transportation in these places are only helicopters. There are no roadways even. There are even no roadways, right? So the mode of transportation is only helicopters. Fixed wing, aeroplane can't go there. Only the mode of transportation available for these places are helicopters. But these places, the weathers are really unpredictable because the terrain is high, the pattern of the wind, the pattern of the pressure that flows in these areas are very unpredictable, right? So these are the things that affect the performance of the helicopter also, right? So we have to be really careful about loads, about the aerodynamic effects that we are going to face. So it's really very challenging for pilot to go in these places.
Yeah, in the air domestic crash that took place in 2019, and I think it was in Pathibara as well. There were a lot of factors that contributed to it. One, as you said, is obviously the weather. And weather was one of the factors, but there was also reports that there was an uneven weight distribution as well.
Before the Pathibara accident, we had a provision of replacing the single seat in the forward of the cabin floor. There is a dual seat provision, right? So instead of single person, two persons can sit on the front portion of the aircraft alongside the pilot, where the co-pilot seat is allocated, right? So we can remove the co-pilot seat and we can put the dual seat instead of the co-pilot seat. So that provision was there. So as I have heard, I haven't read the report, but I have heard that there was an unequal distribution related to this sort of provisions, right? So what CAN did was, authority, what they did was they removed the provision of that dual seat after that incident. So the weight distribution along the aircraft was not appropriate. Because of that, might be the accident that happened. So according to that report, the authority just sent us the circular that you can no longer use the dual seat. So we had to remove the provision after that incident. So might be the reason the CG was not appropriately distributed. So they took the reason and they just brought up with that, removing things.
Okay. You said that weather is particularly treacherous for helicopters to tread on.
Yeah.
But despite that fact, I think that we've seen a great rise in the number of helicopters that have been operating, in that we see more and more helicopters that are operating in the Everest region, for example, as you pointed out, going to the base camps and all. So what might be some of the reasons behind this, apart from obviously the money or the demand?
It might be the demand, because after COVID, our number of flights have been increased, right? Number of flights have been increased. We have increased. We have stall aircraft that goes to the high altitude airports. There are very few operators that operate on such high altitudes, right? So we don't have enough stall aircraft that carries the passenger to the high altitude region. So might be the demand, might be the reason for the increase in operating the helicopter.
So, for example, if there's a helicopter that takes off from Kathmandu, goes somewhere, comes back, you said that before it takes off, there is a particular procedure that you follow in order to test its airworthy. After it descends, there's also, again, a cursory check to deem whether everything is all right. So if a helicopter operates, say, for example, in very remote parts of our country, are there maintenance engineers there as well who do the assessment, or is it up to the pilots themselves?
No, if you're just returning in a day, if your motive of operation is for one day, so you can go and come back in a day, so we don't need the engineers there. But if your motive for the operation is more than a day, you have to take the engineers along. Yeah.
So how difficult is it to become a CAMO manager at particular airlines?
It's really very difficult. It's really very difficult because you have to check everything. And when the authority gives you then approval to fly an aircraft in the Nepalese sky, there is a certificate, air operator certificate that they can give us to fly the aircraft. So it says where you can fly, where is your base, everything, every details is in that certificate. So in that certificate, you get 2 names, right? One, operation director, and the second one is CA manager. So every responsibility of the aircraft are of 2 persons, operation director, CA manager. So you have got a lot of role.
So what are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced working as an aircraft maintenance engineer?
Challenges are like you have to work in a very harsh environment. Suppose if you have to go out of the base, out of Kathmandu, and you are based on, suppose let's say some high altitude places, Lukla or Taksindo, Simikot, anywhere. So the environment is really different from Kathmandu, right? The air pressure is different, the air we breathe is different. So it's really different. So we are going from 4,500 feet to double the height, 9,000 feet, 10,000 feet. So you walk there. So at the beginning of the day, when you reach the place like Lukla, it's really difficult to cope with, because we are adapted in 4,500 feet, we are adapted to breathe in the oxygen according to the pressure that we are adapted in this environment. So when you go to the high altitude, you have different environment there. The pressure is low, atmospheric pressure is low. So you can, get tired really soon. You can get hypoxia. So it's really difficult to adapt at the beginning. It's really difficult to adapt. We have to work in that environment. You can't walk continuously, right? You can't walk continuously. Your body performance gets low, the circadian rhythm of our body, right? The circadian rhythm is completely changed. So it's very difficult at the beginning. It's very difficult. So when you get used to it, when you cope with the environment, after 2 or 3 days, then you can give your best. You can go at your best.
So how much time do you have to spend in places like that in order to get your job done? Say a week, more than that?
Might be more than a week, sometimes more than a month, sometimes maybe longer.
Given that the aircraft come here, what are the specific things that make you want to be there? Because you can inspect the aircraft in Kathmandu itself, right?
Yeah.
So what are the things that are native to that place that you've got to go there and then do all of the safety checks?
Whatever equipment we take from here, whatever we have to be pre-planned for that thing, because we get the information that we have to go to this place for these operations. Our mode of operation is this. Our objective of operation is this. So we have to be very clear about our operations, and we deal according to that, right? So we take whatever equipment, whatever tools are necessary for that operation, right? So if you have to do the slings, right, you have to carry something and get that thing dropped over some places. We take all that equipment that are needed for that operation. We take the sling equipment if needed, every equipment that are needed for that operation. So we have to get everything checked, everything done, every documents that are required for that operations. We take everything. We give our best. We take everything. Every documents we take, every equipment we take. So every things we do there are similar. What we do in the base, what we do on the line, what we do on the out of base things, everything's are similar. No changes. Only change is the environment. Only factor that affect is the environment. Only factor that affect the human performance is the environment.
So has studying aeronautical engineering helped you in some ways in order to become a better CAMO manager?
To be a CA manager, there is a criteria, there is a protocol that you have to follow, and there is certain regulations that you have to fulfill, right? So one of the box that I have achieved from reading by taking the course of aeronautical engineering is that for the post holder, the CA manager, you have criteria that you have to study this, you have to get this diploma, you have to get this degrees, you have to get this experience, you have to get this much years of experience after getting your license. So there is a criteria that says that you have to hold a degree, an engineering degree. So to achieve this post, it has helped me to remove one of the check boxes from the post holder criteria form, which we call it form 4. So it is the form that we have to fill, we have to fulfill the requirement to get the post. It's like something like a checklist.
Checklists.
You have just tick one of the boxes.
Okay. One of the things that I had in mind when I was reading about a month ago was the landing of a particular helicopter at the top of Mount Everest. There was I think it was in 1996.
1996, yeah. Airbus aircraft.
Yeah, Airbus. How did that happen? I mean, you said that it's very difficult to operate in conditions such as our country throws, but as far as almost 30 years ago, an aircraft landed at the top of Everest.
Yeah.
Something that has not been replicated other than the man himself who did it another day.
Yeah. The maximum, the aircraft that was used in that mission, it had certain limitations. So it had weight limitations, it had service ceilings, the altitude limitations. So it was, that tax was out of boundary. That was out of the, board.
Yes, because it was astounding to read, and not simply read, but there is a YouTube video by Airbus itself which shows a helicopter that landed there.
Yeah.
And it still is very, very staggering, even after almost 30 years of getting something like that done.
So, what to say is they did things out of the regulations. Yeah.
Out of the regulations,
because the service ceiling of the helicopter, it's just presently we have AS350 B3 aircraft. Its service ceiling is only 23,000 feet.
So that was almost 30,000.
There was 29,000 and some, almost 30,000 feet. So it was out of its performance. Might be Airbus had to prove something that the aircraft can perform that. So
that's
might be. It was not a commercial flight. It was not a commercial.
That after the Airbus landed there was an increase in the number of that particular type of aircraft. So maybe it was a marketing gimmick.
Marketing, yeah. It might be a marketing gimmick, yeah. So it proved its performance, right?
Yes. I think that there was something for the pilot as well.
Yeah.
He would be immortalized as the first person to fly to Mount Everest.
Might be to prove something. Yeah. Back then I was not even in the aviation. I also don't know exactly what had happened. But with my knowledge presently, it was out of
the ordinary.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there a particular age that a person who's working as CAMO manager might retire? How does that function?
The function is all about the performance. how long can you give your performance? As long as you can give a performance, you can be the CA manager.
So how many years are you looking forward to working in the aviation sector of our country?
30 years and more.
30 years still?
Still, yeah.
Okay.
I'm still young.
Yes, you're very, very young.
Yeah.
So we hope that the rest of the 30 years that you're hoping for to work in the aviation sector
Yeah.
are of the highest quality imaginable. We thank you so much for taking so much time to
Okay.
do this.
Yes, okay, thank you. It was my pleasure.